about, and then I'll introduce my guests a little bit more so that you can get to know them. And then from there, we'll dive right into the conversation. Now, we are discussing crisis of competence, how Re-forma is changing pastoral education. We're going to be telling you more about this thing we are calling Re-forma. Now, more than 2.2 million pastors, pastoral leaders, and as many as 3.4 million by some estimates, presently minister, while only 5% are trained for pastoral ministry. This is according to the Center for the Study of Global Christianity. And this particular center, they actually also did show that more than 2 million pastors need immediate strengthening for their pastoral ministry. This came out of, this data was released in a conference in 2016 by Mr. Ramesh Richard, quoting Todd Johnson. Those of you who follow global Christian statistics and all that, you know Todd Johnson. He's a director for the Center for Study of Global Christianity, and he's produced a lot of very, very important statistics about the situation of the church globally. And he's one of the people who contribute to some of these ideas that are discussed in such forums as Lausanne Global Conference. And so, championing Finish the Task and other initiatives at the global level. So the main concern is this, that the idea that only 5% of people who are pastors are actually trained, have a formal training. So that's the issue we're going to be dealing with today, and we're going to be asking ourselves, what is the solution? So welcome to the Gigi Report. As always, the Gigi Report is a platform for big, bold, honest conversation on a broad range of subject matters, as always, socio-cultural, political, economic, philosophical, and theological. Today we're going to touch both philosophical, theological, and economic, and the social aspects of ministry. Okay, now my guests, like I said, my two guests, on my far left is Dr. Reuben van Rensburg. He's the former president of the South African Theological Seminary, popularly known as SATS, where he served for 17 years. He will tell us more details of what he was doing. And he's the current project director of Re-forma. This is a project which has established a global standard for non-formal ministry training, and is underwritten by the World Evangelical Alliance, and he's going to be telling us more about that. Dr. Reuben earned his PhD or rather Doctor of Theology and Biblical Studies from University of Zululand, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much.
Very good. On my near left is Margaret Gichuki, who serves as the General Secretary of the Education Commission of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and is a volunteer pastor at Karura Community Chapel. Margaret is the Kenya representative for the Re-forma Global, and Margaret holds a Master's of Arts degree in missions with a focus on Islamic studies from Africa International University here in Kenya. And Margaret is actually pursuing her PhD in leadership, I think Christian leadership. And so here we are. So let's dive straight into the conversation. As always, I always like starting with you tell us about yourself, your career, very briefly, although I have already described it, and how you got where you are today. Why are you doing what you're doing? So you can summarize, because I've talked about the education and some of the other career issues.
So I came through education, started as a school teacher, became a school inspector, eventually served as the person responsible for policy development for religious education in the National Department. And then God, for some reason, appointed me as the future principal of SATS, where I served for many years. And at the time I retired, I was actually at that conference where those statistics were released. And at the end of that year, Dr. Manfred Cole, the global ambassador for the Overseas Council, he called together a group of experts from around the world to try to solve the problem of so many pastors being untrained or undertrained. So these people in this committee were asked a simple question: what does a pastor need to be able to know, to do, and to be in order to be declared competent? And they came up with 35 at that stage. It's now 37 now, 35 competencies. I'm familiar with the Kenyan system here in the schools, so I'm sure the viewers are very familiar with the term competence. 35 things that pastors need to be able to know, to do, and to be in order to be declared competent.
Okay.
And we showed that to the World Evangelical Alliance, and they said this is perfect for the first ever global standard for non-formal ministry training. So when somebody earns the certificate from Re-forma, it is underwritten by the World Evangelical Alliance. It has our logo on, and it also has the WEA logo on, signed by Dr. Schermacher. So for the first time in church history, which is amazing because in every other discipline you need some form of qualification, in ministry up till now you've never had to have that. Anybody can do ministry.
Okay.
But now that we have a standard which is accepted globally, when pastors are able to successfully demonstrate those 35 competencies, which are now 37, they receive the certificate, and it's global. So whether they're training in Cuba or Kinshasa or here, it's worldwide accepted, and we're very grateful for that.
Wonderful. We'll be coming back to you. We'll talk more about the Re-forma program.
Sure.
And fantastic. Margaret, tell us your story. Quick story. How you got to where you are today.
Wonderful. Where I am today, I start with that. I work as the national representative for Re-forma program in Kenya. And how I got there is because I felt after doing my master's in Africa International University, I needed to reach out to the unreached people, especially those ones living in the slums, because I had been having a concern about the pastor training since the 2013 moratorium or declaration that there was no more churches that will be opened. The ones that are there are actually more than enough, of course, because of the havoc that was happening through church. And I felt the people that would be more affected would be the pastors in the slums. And therefore, I went to train them on matters that pertain biblical interpretation and such matters. And I felt I would look for programs that would suit the pastors, especially those ones who are not having some education and some form of theological education. And as I was searching, I came across Re-forma. And one of the times they called us for a conference like the one we just finished today at Desmond Tutu in 2022. That time I was still serving at Karura Community Chapel. And I attended and I felt, wow, this is such a big program that has come to our country. And having served as a Secretary General for the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, I was feeling this is something we need to cascade downwards to the grassroots level. But finally, I felt maybe with Aurora Bible Center that I had been serving with, I had opened that for the pastoral training, I would be able now to utilize the Re-forma's program. And I started teaching, and then shortly after I graduated the first group, I was appointed as a national representative. So that's how I got there.
Okay.
But I've also worked in the bank in the years of 2009 till 2013.
Okay.
Before I went to South Africa to pursue my bachelor's of theology.
Wonderful.
Yes, yes.
That's amazing, and thank you very much, Margaret. I think you're very, very passionate about ministry, and since you're a pastor, then you have first-hand experience.
Sure.
Dr. Reuben, you served as a pastor? Yes.
No, I went through education.
Or you went through education routes. Okay, wonderful. Now let's talk about a theological education in general before we come back to Re-forma. The main concern is that theological education basically remains a preserve of rich denominations that can afford to set up their own Bible schools. For example, the mainline evangelical churches in our country, almost all of them have their own denominational theological schools, and they sponsor those people who show interest in priesthood or in the ministry. They sponsor and train them. So they have their systems going. None of them can be appointed to head a diocese or a local congregation without going through their theological training. Even if it's just at the certificate level. So, but then, of course, the rest of the African church, which is rapidly expanding, obviously, is left to its own devices. So why is this trend going? I mean, a rapidly growing evangelical, especially evangelical charismatic movement. How do we solve that problem?
So you've asked two questions there. The first reason is because pastors in the non-formal sector who cannot attend formal institutions simply can't afford it, or they don't have the necessary qualifications to enter tertiary education, or they simply can't leave their family or their business if they bivocational for long periods at a time, which is what would be demanded of them if they went to seminaries. So there's a huge disadvantage for those people in that category. How do we solve it? We solve it by providing a way by which those who are in that sector can receive a global standard.
Okay. Yeah, that's lovely, and I love the solution. This Re-forma has come up with. Tell us about the story of Rwanda. This came up when we were setting up this particular conversation, and we started talking about you coming on the show. There's this story of Rwanda, a very serious, experience. We know what happened in Rwanda. Churches were closed down. The president reigned in on churches for various reasons. Tell us how that has worked out.
So in 2018, as you know, the government introduced a law that said that all pastors have to have a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would be closed down. Well, that is a little bit optimistic in some way, because many of those pastors fall into the same category that we're talking about now. Can't afford it, haven't got the qualifications and so on. So we began to talk to what was known as the Rwandan Governance Board. That's the board that reports directly to the president on religious affairs. And we proposed that our certificate should be satisfactory for those who are not in the position of a supervisory role. She then, the head of the board, organized a second meeting where we addressed the denominational leaders. And last Monday, we called together all the denominational leaders in Rwanda. There were 31 of them present. We had prepared a statement together with the bishop in charge of the Evangelical Alliance to the effect that any pastor in the in Rwanda who obtains our certificate will satisfy the requirements of the denomination for those pastors who are not in the category of a supervisory role. The ones down here that don't have anybody underneath them. And we went and took that statement, which was signed by all 31 members, to the government, and they accepted it. So now, for the first time, the Rwandan pastors who cannot get a bachelor's degree are able to use the certificate that's issued by Re-forma in order to be recognized by their denomination. And it's a huge breakthrough for the church in Rwanda, because the pastors were very afraid. Ever since we gave the good news to them that the government had accepted that statement, we have received nothing but gratitude all the time from the people who were there. They were very fearful, to be honest, because many of them were worried that their churches were going to close down. And the good thing about it, apart from the church, is that other governments, I think, are watching Rwanda.
Yes.
Especially in the East African bloc. And I'm pretty confident that other governments will follow that sort of regulation as time goes by. Already in South Africa, we've had a commission of inquiry into the abuses that are taking place. I know Benin is thinking in a similar way. So the example that Rwanda has set, we are hoping other countries will follow so that their governments recognize our certificate.
Wonderful. I'm sure Margaret here can speak to the situation in Kenya. Just this week, we had this major, news about the government, the Registrar of Society, doing a meeting with some pastors in Githurai area of Nairobi. That's one of the suburbs here in Nairobi, and there are a lot of churches there. Churches, some of who are obviously at the very low level, talking about small patch up of a church, made using iron sheets and all that. Really small churches, right?
Yeah.
Led by guys who are just trying out to put together a congregation and minister in one form or another. So do you think what is happening with the Rwanda, might be a solution to the story that came up and the accusation of rogue pastors and radicalization and all that? Do you think that would address the problem?
Well, I do think that, as we always say in Swahili, ukiona cha mwenzako chanyolewa, tia chako maji.
Yes.
Like when you see someone else's head is being shaved, please be ready because yours is going to be shaved.
That's an African proverb,
yes.
Right?
And that means that our pastors, wherever they are, whether in Githurai or any other place, we've had this discussion for quite a while, that pastors need to put their house in order, as the registrar said. And well, the 1 month may not really work unless we want to just print certificates. That's the truth of the matter.
Yes.
We cannot do that unless we go to River Road, and I know they will come down.
There are printers down, on the River
street.
Road, willing to print
Yes,
certificates for pastors.
Yes, but then they will not take them because they know you can finish a program within the few days that are remaining.
Okay.
But one thing I can say is Rwanda's government, how did it get there? To closing churches and closing so many churches. Of course, we know that churches is a solution to the society around. Like many times you go to the slums and you find if there are a few churches, that means the criminals might not be as many because the church is supposed to depopulate hell and populate heaven, of course, through these churches. And we've seen transformation of societies through the church. And therefore, I would not be for those who say, let them be closed. Because, of course, when you close churches, then you're just saying, let the criminals continue to rise. And I don't think that is what the government is seeking after. But that having been said, there needs to be some form of self-regulation by the church through umbrella bodies, which are there. But then still, there are people who feel, no, we want to be independent. And that has been our problem. I want to be independent. I don't report to no one. I collect offering and put it in one pocket and get it out of the other pocket. No secretary, nobody, no structure and all that. And that heads the church in the wrong direction because we end up having a one-man show, and whatever the prophet or the prophetess says, it goes. And then at the end of it all, people are either hypnotized, or I don't know what happens to Kenyans, or many other Christians who are ignorant in Africa. We head to the wrong direction by following anything that they say. So now what do I mean is that we need a program that can actually help the pastor. And I see Re-forma coming in to help. As Rwanda government has said, we actually recognize the certificate of Re-forma for any person serving at a lower capacity. And there are many, those are the many. We have fewer bishops and many pastors under them. And that having been said, we are working together with a few umbrella bodies to see how we can, first of all, look at the Re-forma curriculum, which is outcomes-based, and also to endorse the curriculum or the notes and say, can you teach this? And when you have taught these, at least someone is able to work well and they are able to be competent. Because remember, at Re-forma, we focus on competencies.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. All right. So let's return, and I'm going to ask this, Dr. Reuben. Let's return to the issue of these untrained pastors. Now, and also this conversation, the Rwanda situation and now the Kenya situation. So recently when this issue that she's talking about came up, some media house reported the story, and they used 3 words that, you know, I feel, you know, do not kind of go together with the word pastor at all. So fake prophets, rogue pastors, radicalizing, all right? Radicalizing the community. So, you know, you know the story of South Africa. You've traveled to many African countries. That's an assumption, but you can clarify. Do you really think that those words should be used together with the word pastor? Is there a problem? Are we losing, are we maybe demonizing genuine people who want to preach the gospel and also want to create a structure where there can be some fellowship, where they are teaching the word? Or is it the reality that, you know, some section of the Christian church has just gone down, you know, to the dark and dirty? So speak to that.
I think we should be careful to paint everybody with the same brush.
Right.
But there definitely are fake prophets. In South Africa, we had a case a year or 2 ago where one of these so-called prophets raised somebody from the dead.
No, we remember that. Yeah,
yes, out of the coffin he came.
You South Africans taught us the bad ideas, right? Out of the coffin.
I think he was definitely proved to be fake. So there are people who are fake. That's just a given.
Yeah.
The word rogue, I've not heard that applied in other countries. This is the first time I've heard it. And certainly radicalization I've not heard before.
Okay.
So that's something new to me. I think apart from those who enter the pastorate for the wrong motive, and generally it would be the people who want money. We recently had a case with one of our board members who was having some alterations done to his house. And the foreman, when he picked up the workers in the morning, he asked them, if you were not a plasterer or a bricklayer, what would you be? And every one of them said, I want to be a pastor.
Okay.
And he said, but why? Why do you want to be a pastor? And they said, because that is where the money is.
All right.
So there are definitely people, that's a given, who are entering the pastorate for their own pockets. Mm-hmm. And I think the prosperity gospel would be a sort of extreme example of that. But then there are the genuine ones who just don't have the qualifications and who, you know, they may even only have a primary school certificate, but they're genuine and they're really trying to pastor the church in an honest way with integrity. So I think we should be careful not to sort of paint everybody with the same brush. Let's deal with the rogue ones or the false prophets as a separate category,
right,
and find a solution.
Yes.
And then for the ones that are genuine, I think Re-forma provides a way by which they can become competent.
Absolutely. And I'm very, very happy that, you know, the Re-forma Global is doing an amazing job. I checked online, you know, I've been checking a lot of things online, and I think I saw something like a report of like 16,000 pastors that have been trained through Re-forma in Kenya or something like that. Give us some of the numbers.
So right now we have 2,620 groups in 87 countries. Mm-hmm. And each of those groups, on our research, would average at between 15 and 20 per group. Sometimes they're very small, sometimes they're enormous. There's one group that has 2,600 schools.
Okay.
And each of those schools would have a large number of students. So the range of size is phenomenal. If we took it though on average, let's say 20 per group, 2,620 groups times 20, those are the ones that are currently in the system. It's a huge number, but it's a small number in comparison to what we need, because we need 1,000 new pastors every day. That's from church planting. And by 2050, we will need 9.7 million pastors.
Wow. I'm gonna stop you there because we are wrapping up this particular section before we go to the break. But the numbers you're talking about are absolutely amazing. You're talking about needing how many pastors per day?
1,000.
1,000 pastors per day.
New
new pastors. So, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who have a vision to be pastors, and of course, we must warn that it's not just mere ambition, in the sense that you want to line up your pockets through pastoral work, but those who really want to serve the Lord, and there are opportunities, and the church demands close to 1,000 pastors every day in major cities in Africa, in the world, and that's the reality. So we need more pastors, and we need them trained. So this is an ongoing conversation, so we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with this conversation and talk about some of the other programs that are available to empower pastors. So don't go away, keep it elevate. We're coming back to this shortly.
There's no nation, no town, no city without fathers.
Being a Holy Spirit-driven church is New Testament.
The quality of the message, it was based in Acts chapter 2.
And I took my Bible and I went from street to street. Is anybody dead here?
We never met those miracles a reason to appeal for money or to be known. No.
Tracing the Mantles is a program whose core is to identify mantle carriers from our fathers.
The Catholic woman stood and he was sliding everywhere. He said, oh yes, now this is the black Catholic woman.
But these are not only mantles, but spiritual authorities that have paid the cost, stood the test of time.
You are given 6 hours to leave the country.
And made lots of sacrifices for the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Many of us invested in the school, college, university ministry.
But these are not only mantles, but spiritual authorities.
One of the things that bring revival in this country is the power of the Holy Spirit, the presence of the Holy Spirit.
Catch Tracing the Mantles every Sunday from 8:30, hosted by Pastor Sunda Juma, only on Elevate TV.
Welcome back. This is the Gigi Report. We are talking about the crisis of competence, the challenge of training pastors. Basically, that's what we mean. And we're actually looking at the role, how Re-forma is actually a non-formal training program. Okay, a training program, a theological training program targeted at training pastors informally, in the sense that you don't have to go to Bible school, but you can train from where you are. And this training program is so good. It's been endorsed by the World Evangelical Alliance. It's been certified just the other day by the Rwandan government as sufficient for a pastor to use to be allowed to run a church. As some of you know, that there was a challenge that came up in Rwanda, and about 2,000 churches were closed. So now there is a solution, and as you know very well, there is a conversation going on in the country about fake, rogue, radicalizing pastors. Those words, those 3 words, associating them with a pastor, that already is a problem. But yes, we have challenges in Kenya, and we have a solution here. And so I just want to acknowledge quickly those of you that are following this conversation on our Facebook page. Betty M. Kiroto, that's my covenant sister. I guess they are talking about Margaret here, and that's wonderful. Grace Esther Wangeshi, you're following. This is amazing. She's amazing. I think talking about Margaret. Margaret is a hero in this show today. James Kamau, this is the way to go. Remember Dr. James Kamau. Dr. James Kamau, maybe you know him. Well said, Dr. Kamau. Okay, and then somebody else. Ruth Eunice is actually following. Grace Esther Wangeshi is following. Eden's Gate. Wonderful. Please tell us where you're watching from. Tell us as you follow this conversation. If you have any questions for my guests, please ask, and let's continue this conversation. So before we went to the break, we were talking about the real problem, the shortage of pastors, and you gave us some amazing statistics. We need 1,000 pastors every day if we're going to keep up with the growth of the church globally. In some places they need more. And before I come back to Margaret to talk about the content of Re-forma, give us a little bit more statistic, because when you were on the break you mentioned some numbers that is amazing.
So the current situation in the US is that there is 1 pastor for every 250 people in the US.
Right.
But in the rest of the world, 1 pastor per 450,000.
Okay. Wow. So that's oh man, I'm telling you, even the police officers, the ratio of pastor to police officers in a country, even the poorest policed countries, I think they are better than that, right? Yeah, so that's a very, very serious challenge. So we need a lot of pastors. 1 pastor for 450,000 people. Pastors are not enough. We need many of you. So please join in the bandwagon. All right. So let's now talk about Re-forma specifically. So we've been talking about this Re-forma program. So he talked about competence-based. That sounds a bit complicated for our Githurai pastors.
Yes.
So please explain to them in simple English what Re-forma is. Mm-hmm. All right. Not that his English is very complex, but you can use Swahili if necessary.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. Competency-based curriculum is like what we are having for our children.
Okay.
You are used to the 844 system, whereby you learn so many things. You're a jack of all trades and a master of none. Like algebra, ask me why I did algebra, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. I don't use it, I don't see what I know algebra, I have no idea why I did it. But anyway, I passed through. When we come to formal education, we have a lot of topics that we learn, and some of them you try to see the application and it's difficult. And I love practical ministry. That is one of my gist. And when I went into mission studies, I was happy that when you do missions, you go and sit with people, get to learn their culture, and then speak with them. Okay. And when you're doing the competency-based curriculum, it helps you to ask yourself, what should I be able to know and to do and to become? So that is what our curriculum focuses on. Like, it's not just a knowledge. The earlier one is a knowledge. You have knowledge of Hebrew. It's a good thing, I love Hebrew. You have knowledge of Greek, and I love that as well. But then now, how do I apply that?
Exegesis.
And
survey, New Testament survey,
yes.
Old Testament survey,
yes.
homiletics, soteriology,
yes.
Systematic theology,
yes.
all those big words,
yes.
right?
Yes.
But the pastor in Githurai don't care.
They don't care of how much of that you know,
yes.
and how much Greek words you can tell them.
Yes.
And I used to tell my people, sometimes I was teaching them how to train, like, you can know big words, but if you come here to intimidate me with big words, then you're not helping me.
Yes.
Can you tell me how I can get my congregation to act in a way that they will be able to see the Lord and to be able to meet their needs while we are still on this earth? And when we come to Re-forma's outcomes, they are organized in such a way that you are equipped Number one, you're equipped for ministry in terms of preparation of a sermon. And we give you an opportunity to prepare a sermon. For my students, they've had to prepare a sermon and preach it in 5 minutes, just like I did. And we are able to say, actually, this is what you did right, this is what you may need to improve. We don't tell people they do wrong, because in adult education, there is nothing like wrong. And we are gracious enough, and we work with people such that they are able to actually prepare a sermon. And that is homiletics in a complicated language.
You teach them how to prepare someone without talking about homiletics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we tell them what you did is called homiletics.
Okay.
You're driving the point home.
All right.
You're applying them. And
Yes.
then we also learn how to interpret the Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
Okay.
So what is the big story of the Bible? We learn where Jesus comes in and why we actually needed salvation. Some of us came to Christ when we were very young, or we've grown up as Christians. 85% of Kenyans is rightly called Christians. But why do I need to be a Christian? Why am I a Christian? And through Reformers Outcomes, you're actually taught about the importance of Jesus' coming. And you realize the sin and the fall of man caused Jesus to have to come so that we can be reconciled back to God. But there are people who are preaching and teaching. They just wake up, open the Bible, wherever verse they open, and they run with that. They don't care who was written for, why was it written, and at what period it was written. And we find a lot of ignorance. When you find some people teaching the Bible and they say, and Judas hanged himself, someone kept on saying, actually there is a person who took a verse and they said Judas hanged themselves and he went and hanged himself. So is that what the Bible is saying? You need to read what is the context. And by context, I mean what is before this verse or before these chapters, what is in the chapter that I want to focus on, and what comes right after that. And those are all skills of biblical interpretation.
Okay.
We also get to focus on family life, preparing a couple for marriage. How do you comfort people who are going through stress, through grief, through marital problems? And you find that in this particular preparation for a pastor, you find that they are able to actually do what they've been taught.
Okay.
And those are things that everyday life in Kenya or anywhere in the world, you're facing all these issues. And the last one I would want to say is the children ministry.
Okay.
My director here, he loves children.
Okay.
And one thing he asks in every conference is, how many verses do you think the Bible focuses on children or about children or youth? And you find people just give about 10, 15 verses in the Bible. Actually, there are over 1,500 verses concerning children or about children. So if God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, could focus on children, how much more? And if we are talking of discipling the next generation, the Generation Z, then we must know that God has a purpose for them. And when you're going out for evangelism, even go and reach out to children, because most of the times we go and we are asking them, when you go for door to door, where's your mom, where's your dad?
Okay.
So we don't focus on them. And so we are discipling the next generation through focusing on how to minister to, with, and by children.
Okay.
Sure.
Wonderful. Yeah, so we don't want to give away everything, so we we want to spare some of the other content for those of you that know for sure you need some kind of training. If you do not have a certificate, you know how to preach. You're doing fine. You're probably running a church. You have mentors. You're part of a denomination, maybe some of the charismatic denominations. You don't have a Bible school in your denomination, so of course I think you probably some of the preachers I know are dependent on the conferences they attend everywhere, and that's how you've earned your credentials, and you teach well and you preach well. But you could get in trouble for not having certification. But now you can take this course. And so I don't know whether it's Margaret or Dr. Reuben, how long does this take, and can you do it online? And because there's some people who already are doing pretty well as pastors, but they don't have any paper to show, and what they want is, if I can do that, get it out of the way, get the certificate, then now I'm pretty, so I don't get in trouble.
I think one of the most difficult things for people to understand the first time they hear about Re-forma is that we're not a Bible college, we're not a seminary, we're not a university, we're not a curriculum.
Okay.
We are the standard. So I always use the example of a driver's license.
Yes.
When you go for your driver's license, the examiner is not interested in how you learned. He doesn't say, did you go to a driving school or did your uncle teach you? All he's interested in is, can you drive the car according to the standard?
Okay.
And it's exactly the same with Re-forma. We don't mind how you get to the standard. You can use your curriculum, you can use somebody else's notes, you can use our notes. That's not the key thing. The key thing is, can you demonstrate the outcomes? Can you show the competencies? Not just know about them, but actually do them.
Okay.
And if you can do them, you get the certificate.
Okay. Okay. So, for example, let's take that further. So I have been teaching. I have a church, and I have 0 certificate. So can I sit for the exam or something?
There's no exam. So with outcomes-based education, the terms are competent or not yet competent.
Okay, okay.
Rather than pass or fail an exam.
Okay.
So there are different ways of assessing each outcome. It could be orally, it could be in written work, it could be group discussions, projects, go out and evangelize, preach a sermon. There are a lot of different ways of showing that you are competent.
Okay.
And we train the facilitators of those groups to get to the point where they can take their students to competence.
Okay.
So our role is not to train the students. Our role is to train the facilitators of those students.
Okay, okay. Oh yeah, so if you're a trained facilitator, you can bring together pastors. Some start, they are starting off, others are reasonably competent, and then it is up to you to design the assessment program and also ensure every member of your class is come to the competence level or demonstrated competence.
Yes, we give them the assessment guidelines for every single outcome so that they can see when the student is actually demonstrating. So when we talk about enrolled groups, we're saying there's a pastor somewhere who saw a need. He has 6 people in his congregation that are looking to be ministry leaders or something like that. He will enroll a group.
Okay.
We will immediately send him everything he needs to teach the program.
Okay.
It's up to him to decide whether he wants to use our material or somebody else's material. But when he is satisfied, or she is satisfied, that those students are competent in all the outcomes, they send us an assessment sheet. We have a look at it very carefully. It's quite a strict process. And when we are satisfied, we will issue the certificate.
Wonderful. That's very good. It's actually good news because you're saying, look, and even I'm sure, Margaret, you're aware that there's a whole institution that was created by the government here, which is leaning towards the idea of skill-based certification.
Yes.
So just like a mechanic, if a mechanic can actually repair a car and they don't have a certificate, now it is possible in Kenya, I don't know how it works, you can get a certificate, maybe grade 1 or grade 2 of mechanic by, I think, going through the test or something like that. So that's really basically what you're saying. And then at the end of it, the idea is you want to show, or you want to be able to say, look, these pastors who hold our certificates, we have assessed them, and we're confident that actually what they say they can do, we have certified they can actually
Absolutely
do.
correct.
Yeah, and that can be a way of helping governments and institutions, so that then you bring in these people to the fold, because they have been treated like outsiders. Wonderful. Now let's maybe then take on one more issue that I think now, keeping the Re-forma story aside, let's go back to the politics of church. The Pentecostal and charismatic branch of the is the fastest growing part of the evangelical movement. So what do you think is driving the growth of charismatic and Pentecostal branch of the evangelical movement? By evangelical, I mean everyone that is part of the evangelizing church. So that's a very broad definition. But the charismatics and Pentecostals, and I think I pick up a figure in Brazil, it's the fastest growing. Here in Africa is the case. The mainline evangelicals are not growing as fast. So why do you think that's the case? What are the charismatic doing better?
So Maggie will also contribute here, but
Yes.
I think from my perspective, a lot of those who move into the charismatic movement have come from religions where the spirit world is very important. And it's easier for them to identify with charismatics who are more focused on the work of the Holy Spirit than, say, the mainline churches are. It's an easier leap from the one to the other.
Okay.
But I know Margaret has some ideas as well.
Okay. Yeah, there is definite connection to the spirit world, but the culture of, especially for my continent, Africa, is that we are drawn towards a spiritual leader, a father, a mother, and these religions or these denominations, they usually most of the times have one person who is at the top, and we want to honor them. And in bid to honor them, we find ourselves we are leaning more towards that than somewhere we think there's some governance board, there are elders who have to decide. But now here we have someone you can call a spiritual father, a spiritual mother. And I think it's just the liking to honor. And then in liking to honor, we want to be led. And also we want someone who can hear the Lord for us. And I think it's more attractive to have someone do all the work. You just come to hear. But when you come to evangelicals or these other mainline churches, you find that a lot of them have interacted with quite a few. Having schooled in an Anglican college, there's a lot of critical thinking. Someone, you don't just tell me, I have been filled with the Spirit, I'm speaking in tongues. You have to tell me, how did that happen? Empirical studies, or how did this actually come to be? You have to convince me. But a lot of us, the rest of us, there's some laziness of interacting with the scripture at some point, and also they're wanting to just be led. We don't have a bad thing. We don't have bad vibes. We just want to be led. We are good followers.
All right.
Yes.
And of course, maybe Dr. Reuben, you can comment. Maybe what she's describing, the idea that you want a human person at the head of the denomination instead of the council or the constitution, the thing that are holding the institution together is a piece of registration. Do you think that that's what she's describing is part of what is driving, the charismatic to prefer? Dr. Reuben will make you a bishop, our bishop, and we you will anoint all of us. You pray for us. We are happy with that, instead of us working with some constitution and a council that decides at the end of the year who gets to pastor, who gets fired, that kind of thing.
That may well be the case, but it's quite interesting to note that historically, Pentecostals have not been very excited about theological education.
Yes.
There's always been the argument, I have the Holy Spirit and the Bible and that's enough. But in the last few years, a definite change has begun to take place. And now there's a much greater need for Pentecostals to study. And so the tide has definitely turned in that direction.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's a very, very good thing. And I really hope that you are enjoying this conversation. I am talking to Dr. Reuben van Rensburg. He's a former president of the South Africa Theological Seminary, one of the institutions where they have trained a lot of theologians and church leaders. And Margaret here has served with the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. She's currently the General Secretary of the Education Commission within the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and also as a pastor. And I'm maybe going to be asking her how her experience has been, pastoring the Karura community in Kenya, the church. How has that been? How many weddings have you ceremonized, or are you ordained to ceremonize? You see, that's what we think pastors do. They bury our dead, baptize our children, and ceremonize our weddings. Else, what is the work of a pastor? Yes.
Well, I would say, having served under Baptist church, there are some roles that are for men, and there are some roles that are for some ordained pastors.
Okay.
The role that I played, that I loved so much as a pastor at Karura Chapel, was having to do discipleship.
Okay.
for the people who are coming as visitors, people who are getting born again. I loved to welcome them and integrate them into the church, running such programs like Mizizi, Ombi, and seeing people go through that and coming back to be workers in the church. And I love that particular part a lot. In terms of weddings, I haven't been ordained to officiate weddings or bury someone, but I've helped people who are going through grief and seen a few people when I was serving in a voluntary capacity, seeing them register for programs like Ndoa, you know, going through marriage counseling. I've served like that. And, being happy that these people have gotten to a level they got married, and they are happy that the church is involved.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then now there's something I think we've been getting a little bit mixed up. I served in the previous regime as a General Secretary for Education Commission for EAK. Currently, I'm part of the commission, but not now as a GS. Yes, thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good. I'm going to turn to you, Dr. Reuben. Have you served as a pastor? I think you said you went through the education. So I've listened to some theologians, and I think one of them who I have a lot of respect for says that there is an advantage of being a pastor and a theologian. Or you are a better theologian if you are a practicing pastor. Do you think that's the case? I mean, you've been leading a congregation, burying some people, baptizing others, and marrying off some wonderful brides. Tell us about that. Is there a connection?
I think it's a huge advantage for a theologian to have been a pastor because they have the practical experience. I think the danger for theologians who haven't is that they could become too theoretical and kind of avoid the praxis. But, you know, there are good theologians who are not pastors. So again, it would be very disingenuous to make rules about that. I think some would and some wouldn't.
Okay, wonderful. And that's true, actually. There are wonderful theologians, especially the ones who take on some of the heavy, issues in the theological arena. Perhaps are not able, maybe, or they don't have a chance to do the practical pastoral work, but they are absolutely fine and fantastic theologians, and they do very well. They write some of the books, translate some of the Bibles, and that's a great thing. So we just have a few minutes to wrap up, and I just want to read some comments here as we wrap this up. And Grace Wageshi, I think I had read Grace's comment, but I have Betty M. Kiroto saying here, thank you, Gigi, for hosting Dr. Reuben. He is simple in his teaching, but very authentic. The Re-forma outcomes are the best for equipping pastors, especially in addressing the challenges facing the church in the 21st century. Thank you, Elevate TV, for hosting Re-forma Global. Beatrice watching from Roiro. So that's Beatrice watching from Roiro. She's taken time to thank and to recognize Dr. Reuben and Margaret over here. Ruth Eunice here is saying Re-forma is quality Bible training that will go a long way to help pastors gain an approval from their congregants as well as the government, making the church to gain the standards for solid doctrines. I thank God for Re-forma team. Ruth Eunice watching from Georgia. That's wonderful. And then one more, glorious Jane here, wonderful Re-forma doing a great work among the clergy. So yes, you got now your feedback. You're doing a good job. You can keep a very nice smile, sir. And I hope you've enjoyed your stay in Nairobi the last few days. How many times have you been in Kenya?
Oh, more than 10.
More than 10. And in any case, you are an African. You're from South Africa, all right?
I am.
So nobody should discriminate against my Mzungu friend, my newfound Mzungu friend. He's a true African, all the way from Cape Town, or I don't know whether it's Cape Town or somewhere else in South Africa. Dr. Reuben Vance, Rensburg. I have a friend in South Africa called Rensburg. So that's a good thing. Welcome. And really, it's been a pleasure to host you guys here and to have you on the show. I'm so excited, and thank you very much for bringing us this this information. So before we wrap up, I would like to give you an opportunity, to speak to our audience, and in exactly about 60 seconds, tell them about FROMA, what's coming in the future, and just goodwill for those who want to pursue formal and informal education. That camera is for
Thank you for that. If you're watching out there and you have a deep desire to be a pastor or a ministry leader, I would strongly urge you to have a look at the website. It's www.re-forma.global, Re-forma.global. And there you'll find all the outcomes, all the competencies, and all that you need in order to pursue this calling that you have. And we'd be excited to help you along your journey.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Dr. Reuben van Rensburg, we're so pleased to have you on the show, and thank you for the kind words. So over to you, Margaret. Look at that camera and speak to our fellow Kenyans that are watching, and those who are interested in joining Re-forma, you can tell them what to do.
All right, thank you so much, Elevate TV, for having me here, and my director, Dr. Reuben. We also thank you so much, Gigi, for your quick reaching to us. And for Kenyans, I would urge us to pursue theological education and pursue competency-based curriculum, especially so that you are able to put into practice what you are learning. And you can find us on our website. We are here in Kenya. My name is Margaret Gichuki, and you can Google the website. You will find my name, and wherever you find me, you find Re-forma. But also you can look for Re-forma, and you can SMS. You can write for us. Dr. Reuben's page on LinkedIn is very open. You can always message him, and he will get back to you within seconds. Thank you once again, and God bless you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, my two guests, and those of you that have been following this conversation. It's been a pleasure and to talk about this whole issue of crisis of competence. The idea that pastors, we don't have a lot of trained pastors. We've been given the statistics. I don't want to repeat them, but I want to wish all of you pastors and church leaders that yes, you can get high quality education without paying a fortune for it. It's actually, the Re-forma program is actually free. Dr. Reuben tells us it's only $5 for the certificate, and that's really just to make the paperwork just finalized. $5 is equivalent to about 600 Kenya shillings. So that's really very affordable. Nothing else you pay. There are trainers that have been trained to be able to reach to you. So please reach out to Re-forma, get yourself some certification, and get the skills you need, the competence you need to take the gospel forward. God bless you so much. The church needs 1,000 pastors every day, and you could be one of them. So God bless you. We'll see you another day. Keep it Elevate TV. I'll be your host, Godfrey Gichuki. This is a Gigi Report. Never miss a heartbeat. We look forward to seeing you another day. God bless you, and bye for now.